Hello everyone. Today we are doing pork two different ways, but I'm going to do it in two different videos so you don't have to stay through the whole thing if you're only interested in one recipe or the other. This recipe is for pulled pork with from scratch barbecue sauce and coleslaw on pretzel buns, and that is going to be amazing. The second recipe, and I'd love for you to go check that one out as well, will be pork chili verde, but we'll get to that on another video. So for now, I wanted to get you guys started. We're gonna start with the barbecue sauce, and there is a secret ingredient. This is my dad's barbecue sauce recipe from when he was in cooking school. My dad was a chef at the Dunes. He ran the Top of the Dunes restaurant, and this was a recipe for barbecue sauce that he learned way back in cooking school. I was about 10 years old, and I'm not going to help you with the math on that. You're just going to have to extrapolate that number on your own. So it was a minute ago. All right, so we're going to start with half a cup of ketchup. And anytime you're dealing with something sticky, molasses, ketchup, anything that you are going to put in a measuring cup that could potentially get stuck, it's always helpful to spray it with just a little bit of olive oil spray or some kind of non-stick spray. Now this is a full-sized measuring cup, so I'm just going to fill it about halfway with ketchup, and we're going to call that done. So half a cup. And we're gonna dump that in. And see how it came out almost clean? Because we sprayed it with the vegetable oil. We're going to do 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. Gotta get it all in there if we're gonna use it, right? I wanna make sure you guys can see that. Okay. And we are going to do 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. I know sometimes people use white vinegar, and if you make it and it's not tart enough for you, then you can always switch to white vinegar. I personally would rather use the apple cider vinegar that also gives it a little bit of sweetness, and then I don't have to use as much sugar in the barbecue sauce that way. We are going to measure out just under a teaspoon, probably a half teaspoon of salt, and put that in there. Depends on how big your hands are, but always try to go for about the size of a quarter, and then that's about a half a teaspoon in the palm of your hand. Paprika, now this we are going to measure. Oops. We are going to do 2 teaspoons of paprika. So there's 1, 2, and we are going to do a tablespoon of Worcestershire. I think that's how you say it. Some people say Worcestershire, some people say Worcestershire. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but this is the stuff. Hopefully that helps. We're gonna add a tablespoon of this. All right. And then we're gonna add a little bit of cayenne pepper. Now you don't have to, the cayenne pepper is optional. I personally like just a tiny bit of spice in my barbecue sauce, but if you are not one who likes spicy stuff, omit it, or try it, just try maybe a quarter of a teaspoon and see how you like it. You might surprise yourself. So it's a half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And so far this is all pretty run of the mill. Haven't revealed to you yet the secret ingredient, but that would be fresh pineapple. Now this looks very full. This is a 1 cup measurer and it looks pretty full, but by the time we puree it, it'll probably be about half because these are pretty good sized chunks. You can use canned pineapple. That will work as well. I personally like my fruit very, very ripe. And this pineapple, as you can see by the dark yellow color, is very, very ripe. So not only is this gonna give a really rich pineapple flavor, but it's also gonna give it some delicious sweetness. So that's our secret ingredient. Don't tell anyone, we'll keep it between us. And then when your friends come over for these pulled pork sandwiches, they will be blown away by how good they are, and you can tell them or not tell them, that's up to you. So let me run this blender, and we're gonna have some barbecue sauce. Okay, so now we have barbecue sauce. I'm gonna put that off to the side for a minute. And now we're gonna talk about pork. Now, just like I showed you with the video on carnitas, you can buy pork shoulder one of two ways. You can either buy it as a whole roast, and then you have to cut it, and if there's a bone in it, you have to cut around the bone, chop it into chunks, and that's fine. I'm gonna do this for our chili verde and pulled pork. I'm gonna cut this up and use a little bit of it for both. But I also wanted to show you that you can buy it already pre-sliced without the bones. These are called country style pork ribs, and they accomplish the same thing. It's the exact same cut of meat without the bone, typically, and you just have to slice this into chunks and you're done. But I just wanted to give you both options. For right now, I'm gonna set this aside and I'm gonna tackle the pork roast because I do want you to see how you cut that up when you're cooking. So hold on one second, let me get it out of the bag and into a way that we won't get it all over the countertop. So hold tight. Before I wrangle this pork shoulder into submission, I wanted to show you anytime you're cutting around a bone, it is nice to have, I love my cleaver. This is a Cutco knife and I love this guy, it's amazing. But when you're cutting around a bone, sometimes it's nice to have something a little more delicate and a blade that's got a little bit of flex to it. This particular one is made by Wiltshire and this is old. I probably got this for Christmas in 1983. So again, stop doing math. Let's just, don't even talk about it. This is by Wiltshire and it's a self-sharpening knife. So every time I put it in or take it out, it sharpens that knife for me. You can see that I've had it for quite a while because there's a little bit of an arch cut out of the blade, but it still works great. And this is still my favorite knife when I'm dealing with raw meat anywhere near bones. Okay, now we are ready to beat this poor pork roast into submission. Now this is called a pork butt or a pork shoulder. I know that's kind of an oxymoron because it should be one or the other. It seems like they're at different ends of the animal and I can't explain to you why they call it what they call it, but they do. So on the end of this, you can see a bone. We're gonna start there. We're just gonna cut along the edge of that bone. And it doesn't have to be perfectly clean because we can still just throw it into the crock pot when we get to that point, bone and all. And the bone will only add flavor to our meat. So I'm just starting along the edge of this bone and cutting through the roast, just like this. And like I said, I'm gonna save the other half for chili verde. So for right now, we're just gonna use this roast, this half of the roast. And here's the bone right here, right there. We're just gonna leave that in place. And then I'm gonna go through and slice this up. So one long cut, end to end. Now I'm gonna push this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. And I try not to touch things with my hands when I'm dealing with raw meat, except for the meat and the knife. And then I will go over and wash my hands and wash the knife and wash the cutting board and wash anything that came in contact with that raw meat, because that is very, very important to be clean and sanitary when you're working with raw meat or raw fish of any kind, because they can have parasites So we're gonna start with this amount of meat, which this was, I believe, about a 4-pound roast. So this is probably about 2 pounds of cut up pork butt or pork shoulder. I'm gonna wash, I'll be back.
Heat your pot, add 1 to 2 tablespoons of the oil of your choice, and when the oil is hot, add your meat chunks and sear them. Season with salt, pepper, and minced onion.
So we've turned over all of the pieces of meat that we've been searing, and they've got some beautiful color. We're waiting for the second side to sear, and then we're going to transfer them to our crock pot where they will be on low for several hours with our from scratch barbecue sauce. I've already been warming up my crock pot. It's set on low, and I'm going to take all of these pieces of meat and dump them in here. Beautiful sear on both sides. That's exactly what you want. And we have our little chunks of onion, minced onion that we used the dried stuff because we didn't want to add any liquid and risk not getting a really good sear on the meat, because that would be tragic. You guys, this smells so good. So I'm gonna scrape out the rest of the stuff in the pan and make sure that that ends up in here, because as you know, if you've done any of my videos with me before, I'm a huge fan of the scrapings, because the scrapings, those little golden bits at the bottom, oh my gosh, those have the most flavor. Now we're gonna add our homemade barbecue sauce. Now this was the barbecue sauce that had our secret ingredient with the pineapple, and I definitely would love for you guys to try this. If this is more work than you want to do, or you don't have time, you just need a quick dinner, you can always use a store-bought sauce. Bullseye makes a really good one, and Trader Joe's has a great organic one that I like a lot too. I think it's Kansas City style. With the coleslaw we're going to do with this, that has another secret ingredient, actually 2. You are really gonna like that smoky flavor along with some of the elements of the coleslaw that we're gonna put with it. And before you say you don't like coleslaw, just give it a shot. Just try it. I used to do that with my kids. It was called a no thank you helping. Just 1 tablespoon. That's all you have to try. That's our pork with our homemade barbecue sauce. I'm just gonna put a lid on it, and we will check on this in about 2 hours and see how it's progressing. This is our barbecue pork. I did mix up another batch of the barbecue sauce, so it was a little richer in flavor. And for the amount of meat that we had, it needed a little more. So it was a double recipe of barbecue sauce, and I think we probably had 2 to 3 pounds of pork in here, just cut up into pieces. It's looking absolutely fabulous. I pulled this out of the crock pot last night and put it in the refrigerator to cool so that I could go and skim all of the fat off of the top. This particular cut of pork is pretty fatty, so if you don't want it to have a ton of fat in your finished product, then it's a really good thing to go through and get the extra fat out of the dish. So I'm just skimming off the top. It's nice and chilled, and the fat separates very easily. And that should do it. Now I'm going to heat it back up. Just wanted to show you how to break apart the chunks of the pulled pork. When it is tender enough, when you've cooked it enough, it should literally just fall apart. You take 2 forks, push with one, hold with the other. So I'm just going to keep separating this, and I'll put it in the pan and warm it up with some sauce. We are here to finish up our barbecue pork sandwiches. So we're getting ready to make the coleslaw. that is one of the easiest things to do. Now you can buy store-bought coleslaw, but typically by the time you purchase it, the cabbage has been sitting in the dressing for quite some time. It's kind of soggy. It's just not very appetizing in my opinion. They also put a ton of sugar in the dressing, which is not necessarily healthy. So we're gonna start with a quarter of a head of green cabbage. And this goes a long way. So you'll probably have plenty of cabbage left over, and you could use your leftover cabbage with the ahi tuna that we made in one of the other videos that you're gonna wanna check out. So I'm gonna start by slicing through this just as thin as I possibly can so that they are the tiniest, thinnest ribbons. That's sometimes another reason why people don't like coleslaw is they're great big chunks of cabbage. And that's not always the best either. And the last thing that I want to tell you is make sure that you use a fresh cabbage, because the longer they sit, they get a little bitter, and that's also not appealing. So you can buy your cabbage pre-cut and save yourself some time, but honestly, you've watched me do this and it hasn't taken very long at all. When you get towards the core, don't use those big chunks. We're gonna put those aside. And I'm just gonna trim around the core. So you see that big chunk in the middle, we're not gonna use that. So I'm just dumping this in here, and then it gets easier. You can shred your own carrots if you like. I just don't care for the grater. Plus I get my knuckles in there sometimes, and that's no fun. So I put about 1.5 really good sized handfuls of carrots. So there's a nice mix of carrots and cabbage, which gives you beautiful color. And then we are going to make our dressing. We are going to start with a small bowl. This is about 1/3 cup of mayo, and we're going to do that twice. So you have 1/2 to 2/3 cup of mayonnaise, depending on how thick you want your dressing to be when it's done. The next step we're going to do is we're going to take a lemon and we're going to zest it. If you've never done this before, you need a finely sized grater, and you're just going to work your way around the lemon, taking only the yellow part off. You don't want a bunch of the white part. The pith makes it really bitter. So we're just trying to get a little bit of extra lemon essence into this. It also doesn't have to be perfect. If you have spaces where there's still a bit of lemon left, lemon skin, that's just fine. When you're done, make sure that you got all the lemon off the back of your grater, because you don't want to miss out on any of that. That is delicious flavor. Cut your lemon in half. Take your lemon squeezer and give it a good squeeze. And we're going to use both halves of this lemon. Now, if you don't have a lemon squeezer, that's okay. You saw me put this in face down so that the rounded part, the butt of the lemon is up, and then you squeeze it and it makes it inverts the lemon to get the juice out. But if you don't have a lemon squeezer, you can always just use your hand. Grip the lemon tightly, put your other hand underneath it to catch the seeds. And then I squeeze and push, almost like I'm snapping my fingers. Squeeze and push while you turn. Rotate the lemon so that you've squeezed and pushed all the way around. That catches the seeds so they don't end up in your dressing. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of maple syrup. I really, really like maple syrup with lemon. It sounds very bizarre, but it really is a nice way to sweeten it. And I put a tablespoon of maple syrup. If you don't want to use maple syrup, you can use a little bit of sugar or brown sugar or even stevia if you're watching your sugar intake. but you'd have to experiment to find the amount that's right for you. I don't like it super, super sweet. I want to taste the coleslaw and the lemon as much as possible. And the more sugar you put in, the more that defeats that purpose. So I'm just going to dress this, mix it all in. The last thing that we're going to do for color and a little bit of sweetness to counteract the lemon is to make some thin slices. These are about 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to stack them up and cut them as thin as possible, like little matchsticks. I leave the skins on them. I like the texture and the color. And you want a sweet apple for this. I would not use a Granny Smith or anything like that. This particular apple is an Envy apple. Okay, so we're just gonna toss our apples in there. And I'm gonna take my tongs and just give this a toss. Now, I personally think it's a much better way to give your coleslaw a little bit of sweet with this touch of apple, because the apple gives you a little bit of fiber, and it's also going to add a lot of flavor, not just that little bite of sweet. We actually ended up with 2 secret ingredients in our coleslaw. We have our lemon, which is not a typical dressing, lemon and maple syrup, and then we have the apple. So I guess almost 3, really, right? So now we're just gonna serve up our sandwich. We're going to start with a pretzel bread roll. And these I thought I got them at Trader Joe's, but I think it might have been Smart and Final, but they are really, really yummy. We're gonna start with a pretzel bread roll, and then we're going to add our barbecue pork. And I usually do a pretty generous serving. I want at least half of a cup or more of the barbecue pork on this sandwich. And then a little bit of our beautiful coleslaw. I say a little bit, but kind of not a little bit, kind of a lot. And there we go. There's our sandwich. I hope you'll like it. This makes a fabulous summer treat for a barbecue, or, you know, something you can bring over to friends' houses for a potluck. 4th of July is coming up, hint, hint. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Take care.